In Peru, everything is ready ahead of tomorrow's presidential runoff between candidates Pedro Castillo and Keiko Fujimori. The National Strike Committee has announced its willingness to hold talks with the Colombian government. And Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the finishing of a gas pipeline project with Germany. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm José Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. We start in Peru, where everything is set up ahead of tomorrow's presidential elections. The National Office of Electoral Processes has started the distribution of more than 380 tons of electoral material to Capital Lima and Callao ahead of the June 6 presidential runoff between left-wing candidate Pedro Castillo and right-wing Keiko Fujimori. For this election, it is expected that Peruvian citizens, not only in the national territory but also abroad, will attend in a higher percentage than in the first round.
It is the most important deployment of electoral material for this second round. We have already deployed electoral material for abroad, for our 94 offices nationwide, and we have deployed the material for the most remote places.
The National Jury of Elections of Peru informed that at least 150 international observers will accompany the presidential elections this Sunday, June 6th. The electoral authority specified that 99 observers will supervise the runoff elections in Peru, while 51 will do it from abroad. The largest number of participants was provided by the Organization of American States, with 34, followed by the Inter-American Union of Electoral Organizations, which assigned 20 observers. The rest of the delegation is made up of observers from the European Union, the Permanent Conference of Political Parties of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Ecuadorian Human Rights Committee. Still in Peru, thousands of people took to the streets in several cities across the country to reject a possible administration led by the presidential candidate Keiko Fujimori, accused by the prosecutor's office of leading a criminal organization. Our correspondent Veronica Insausti has more information in the following report.
Days before the elections, thousands of citizens filled the main squares of their cities to reject the Peruvian state being taken over by a presidential candidate accused by the prosecutor's office of leading a criminal organization.
We will not allow a criminal to represent 35 million Peruvian workers. We don't want that government of the 90s, where there was no freedom of expression, where they suppressed all our rights. As a teacher, I know I have lived it. That is why I say Fujimori never again.
In the 90s, during the dictatorial government of Alberto Fujimori, corruption pervaded in all public institutions, and to date, it has been difficult to rebuild them.
Fujimorismo hijacked the state from the inside, seized public institutions and left corruption at every turn in each of these institutions that have been taken over once again, this time by various criminal organizations, on which the new Fujimorismo has also been established, which is the same Fujimorismo as always, but preaches new ideas and is represented by Mrs. Fujimori.
In Peru, the corruption included 6 former presidents who ruled during the last 30 years. 3 are still in prison and 1 committed suicide before being arrested. The business sector also colluded, and bribery became normal.
I believe that the entire political class is corrupt, especially from presidential spheres, but also in the economy, because we have had a business elite, the National Confederation of Private Businesses Institutions, committed to corruption, the Construction Club, buying parliamentary seats for their own benefit, with laws in their own name, as in the case of Dionisio Romero and the entire corporate group of the Credit Bank around the healthy food law. So, where are we at? This is the most critical situation in our Republican history, and today, to reaffirm its continuity is immoral.
In addition to the health, economic, and political crisis, there is a moral crisis eating away at the public and private sectors. The Peruvian people are crying out for radical and urgent change.
Veronica Insausti, TeleSUR, Peru.
In Colombia, after 38 days of protests, the National Strike Committee reiterated its willingness to hold talks with the government. The committee held President Iván Duque's government responsible for the slow progress in the talks, aimed at creating a sustainable scenario for negotiations on the country's future. According to the strike committee, an agreement has been reached on half of the issues on the proposed agenda: non-involvement of military forces in controlling protests, the autonomy of local governments to manage demonstrations, a ban on the use of firearms against protesters are among the main points in dispute. Still in Colombia, security forces continue with the violent repression of protests. Public transportation facilities are reportedly being used as provisional detention centers. According to the media outlet Colombia Informa, in several sectors of capital Bogota, the mobile anti-riot squad attacked demonstrators and detained them in bus stations. The Portal Suba, one of the main stations of the Transmilenio public transportation system of Bogota, police harassed journalists and human rights defenders who were gathered around the area. This week, the Transmilenio company confirmed the allegations. 4 protesters were detained at Portal de Suba on May 19, while 10 others, including a woman, were detained at Portal Americas between May 3rd and 4th, according to the statement from the company. As the protest continues, more than 400 COVID-19 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours in Colombia. Meanwhile, the Pan American Health Organization confirmed that the country registers the highest daily rate of infections in South America. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Colombia has registered more than 3.5 million cases of COVID-19 and over 90,000 deaths. Almost 30,000 new infections were diagnosed on Thursday as the nation faces deep social and political crisis. According to this organization, Colombia has the highest infection rates since March 6, 2020, when the first case of COVID-19 was recorded. Despite the data, the government opened its borders this week, prompting protests from Panama and Venezuela. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Chile, a few days before the body that will draft the new constitution is formed, the results of the platform called We Have to Talk About Chile were announced, in which more than 100,000 people participated with ideas and proposals for the members of the Constitutional Convention. Our correspondent Paola Dragnik has the story.
These are some of the faces in those in Chile whose mission is to write a new constitution. This is the first time that almost all of them have come together. They are 101 of the 155 elected by the people of Chile for this task.
You will be the voices, as you know very well, of a population that has long felt marginalized from any relevant decision making, and what is expected from you is precisely that you will be making decisions on issues that are crucial to citizens.
They were invited by the University of Chile and the Catholic University so that they could find out the results of the public debates that this institution carried out during 2020 under the platform We Have to Talk About Chile.
That they really work for the benefit of the country as a whole, that they understand the dialogue and understand all the points, otherwise the new constitution will be of no use, because everything that we have done will be of no use.
8,000 inhabitants of the 346 communes of the country participated, who, through video calls and without knowing each other, discussed what to change, maintain and improve in Chile. Another 95,000 did so through digital consultations. This is the most important citizen participation exercise carried out in the country, and today it seeks to become a source of information to support the future Constitutional Convention members.
We have to assume this feeling of certainty and give assurances, and I believe that the first responsibility we have the rules to have clear rule.
In Chile, citizens have never written a constitution. Everyone is seeking strategies, advice and support. That is why this initiative not only delivers results, but also offers techniques to get closer to citizens.
To ask you if you would be available to work, essentially to guide the territorial teams of the Constitutional Convention to develop in-depth work in relation to the participation in our efforts.
As part of the challenge of including as many people as possible, more than 50 civil society organizations and 27 other universities in the country supported the debates, which include remote and rural areas and persons deprived of their liberty.
This is not going to be a success if it is seen that the constituent process is limited to a group of people elected at the ballot box, who lock themselves up in Santiago in a palace and come out after a year with a text that is proposed to citizens to approve or reject. There must be participation.
Improving public sector ethics, valuing diversity, the perception of a state and political system that does not care about the needs of the people are some of the 10 conclusions that emerged from the We Need to Talk About Chile project.
I came from the second region of the city of Calama at 2,200 meters altitude, the only highline city of this country, a zone of sacrifice, an area saturated by contamination.
How will these concerns be addressed in the new constitution? It would depend on these elected figures, but also on citizen vigilance.
Italo Retamal y Paola Dragnik, TeleSUR, Chile.
Syria's Kurds have handed 4 relatives of the Islamic State group fighters, including 3 children, to Dutch diplomats for repatriation. The group consisted of a Dutch woman and her 2 children, as well as another 12-year-old girl. Top Syrian Kurdish foreign affairs official Abdel Karim Omar said this was a humanitarian case whose mother had agreed to her repatriation following a request from the Dutch government. Since the fall of the Islamic State's caliphate in March 2019, Syria's Kurds and the United Nations have urged foreign countries to repatriate their nationals held in the northeast Syria. At least 220 children with Dutch nationality remains in Syria or Turkey, 75% of whom are under the age of 4 and were born in the region to parents with Dutch citizenship.
Today we will hand to the Dutch government a woman and her 2 children. This woman is conforming with the autonomous administration's policy. When we do not have proof or evidence showing that women have committed crimes in this region, we can hand them over to their countries. We will also hand them a young girl. She has a mother, but this is a special humanitarian case. We agreed to hand her over to the Dutch government after obtaining written consent from her mother for her repatriation.
Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered a speech at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, where he announced the finishing of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea. The United States has opposed the construction of the pipeline, even sanctioning companies for participating in this project.
People from different countries, including businessmen, heads of big European companies and other companies, visit Russia specifically with a purpose to vaccinate against the coronavirus. In this regard, I asked the government to analyze all the aspects of this issue until the end of the month, so that to organize the conditions for paid vaccination for foreign citizens in our country in correspondence with the safety precautions and sanitary control. 2.5 hours ago, the laying of the pipes of the first gas pipeline Nord Stream 2 was finished. The construction works of the second gas pipeline continues. The line work, including the offshore section, was finished. What is left is that there is a pipe that came from the German side and a pipe from the Russian side. They needed to be lifted and welded. That's it. But the pipeline was finished.
The Russian president also demanded to take more actions in curbing greenhouse gas emissions and praised his country's coronavirus vaccine effort.
In the next 30 years, the accumulated volume of net greenhouse gas emissions should be lower than in Europe. I believe it's an ambitious task, but it can be solved. I call on the government to develop a detailed plan of action. Today, every citizen of Russia has the opportunity to be vaccinated. It is comfortable as possible, voluntary and free of charge. I'd like to ask our citizens to take this opportunity and protect themselves and their loved ones. The Russian vaccine has been recognized as the safest and most effective. Efficiency is over 96%, and according to our regulatory agencies, there have been no fatalities from the use of Sputnik V and others.
The finance ministers of the Group of 7 have met in England ahead of the summit next week. The meeting was hosted by British Finance Minister Rishi Sunak with his counterparts from Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United States. The ministers agreed on prompting more financial aid programs to fight the economic crisis sparked by the coronavirus. Climate change and social inequalities were also discussed, as well as the regulation of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. The group of seven leaders will gather in southwest England on June 11th, with U.S. President Joe Biden attending on his first foreign tour since taking office in January. Meanwhile, the G7 health ministers continue a two-day meeting addressing issues such as a fair distribution of vaccines with developing countries. The bloc is divided on demands for the temporary waiver of vaccine patents to enhance access to immunization, with transnational pharmaceutical strongly opposing this demand. In Canada, the chief of the First Nation community said they want a public apology from the Catholic Church after the remains of over 200 children were found buried at the former residential school.
This is not a mass grave, but rather unmarked burial sites that are, to our knowledge, also undocumented. These are preliminary findings, and that we expect to have a final report near the end of this month. We will be sharing the findings, including the technical aspects, with our community and with the home communities of the lost children. In the end, what we do want an apology, a public apology, not just for us, but for the world who also shared in those suffrages. Holding the Catholic Church to account, there has never been an apology from the Roman Catholics.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin blasted the United States for abusing the concept of national security and blacklisting Chinese companies.
The US government has generalized the concept of national security and abused state power to suppress and constrain Chinese companies by any possible means. China firmly opposes this. The US Act violates market principles, disrupts market rules and order, and harms the legitimate rights and interests of both Chinese enterprises and the investors from other countries, including the United States. China urges the US to respect market rules and principles, drop all kinds of so-called lists that suppress Chinese enterprises, and provide them with a fair, just, and non-discriminatory business environment. The Chinese government will take necessary measures to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
At least 20 African migrants remain missing a day after two boats sank off the coast of Tunisia, according to officials. The Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights has reported that scores of bodies have been found floating near the coast. The two bodies have been so far recovered, while some 109 people were rescued. This is the latest in a series of accidents involving migrant boats. Last month, 50 migrants drowned off Tunisia in May, while 100 others were rescued. These accidents made organizations, including the Tunisian Red Crescent and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, on high alert. Volunteers are on standby to provide assistance to irregular migrants rescued by the Navy or Coast Guard.
We are working with other agencies, regional authorities, and the port administration to provide aid to survivors. At present, we are offering help to survivors in coastal regions such as Sarsis, and supplies, including water, have arrived.
The Economic Community of Central African States met this Friday in Congo's capital to evaluate the political crisis in Chad. The leaders of Congo, Angola, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo were among the members of the bloc in attendance. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, called to support the political transition process in Chad. The country has had a transitional government since the death of longtime leader President Idriss Déby Itno, who was killed in April in combat against rebels in the north of the country. His son, Mahamat Idris Deby, took over as the transitional leader a day after his death and promised elections in 18 months. However, the security situation in the country is fragile and the political scenario is tense, sparking concerns that chaos could spread in the region.
We call on all political actors and all active forces in Chad to bear in mind the higher interest of the nation and the good of the Chadian people, and to cooperate sincerely and effectively in order to achieve the objectives of the political transition within 18 months. External contributions, whatever their scope and magnitude, will remain a simple complement whose effectiveness will depend on what the Chadians themselves are willing to do with their transition and their own national destiny. Our duty and our responsibility towards our sub-region challenges us again. They invite us to an even stronger commitment to a peaceful transition in Chad.
The Belgian Prime Minister announced on Friday that travel restrictions this summer will be eased with the use of the European COVID certificate.
The number one rule is that whoever comes back from a green or orange zone will not have to quarantine. But for those traveling to or from a red zone, it has been agreed that if you use the COVID certificate, there will be no quarantine either. That means that if you come back from a red zone, there will be no quarantine nor tests required when arriving in Belgium, on the condition that you are fully vaccinated for at least 2 weeks, or that you can present a negative PCR test less than 72 hours old, or that you can present a certificate proving that you recovered from coronavirus.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has criticized the United States for excluding his country from a vaccine donation program for developing countries.
Hamas Story has just declared that Joe Biden's government is going to donate vaccines to the world, but that they are not going to donate vaccines to Venezuela. They hate us, they think of us negatively, they are miserable. Hamas Story, you are miserable people who hate and despise Venezuela because we are rebels, we are Bolivarian, and we are going to continue being so, and Venezuela is going to have all your vaccines.
Cuban authorities announced on Friday the beginning of a massive vaccination campaign in Havana, where the domestically developed jab Abdala is already being applied to groups and neighborhoods most vulnerable. The aim is to achieve the full 3-dose immunization for the entire population of Cuba's capital by the end of July, the Minister of Public Health, José Ángel Portal Miranda, explained. According to the plan, all Havana residents will get at least one shot of Abdala by late June. Cuba has developed 5 COVID-19 vaccine candidates despite the severe limitations due to the U.S. blockade. Health authorities in India claim the country is on its way to recovery from the devastating second wave of COVID-19 infections. According to the government officials, weekly cases have fallen 63% from the peak in early May. However, restrictions have continued to be imposed in many parts of the country, including capital New Delhi, where most shops and marketplaces have remained closed for more than a month. The Health Ministry warned the battle against the virus was not over, and people must continue to follow appropriate behavior. A member of the National Institution for Transforming India said the country had now overtaken the United States in terms of the total number of people who had received a first dose of COVID-19 vaccine.
We have overtaken US in terms of number of people who have received at least a single dose of COVID-19 vaccine. I repeat, we have overtaken US in terms of number of people in our country who have received at least one dose of vaccine.
This is a long-drawn battle. It is not going to end soon. So, since this is a long-drawn battle, we need to keep at it with the same determination and momentum, which means we need to continue proper COVID-appropriate behavior.
And we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories, as always, in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm José Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.